All right, let's just jump right in. We're talking about a single event, a moment so catastrophic it didn't just defeat a superpower, it humiliated it. This is the story of the day a Roman emperor was put in chains and the world was never the same.
You know, for centuries, if you were alive, Rome was the world. Its emperors, practically gods. Its legions, unstoppable. Or so everyone thought, because in the year 260 AD, that whole idea, that myth of invincibility, it didn't just crack, it completely shattered. And here you have it, straight from the horse's mouth. This is Shapur I, the Sasanian king, basically shouting his victory from the rooftops. And get this, he's not just bragging about beating an army. He's saying he captured the Roman emperor, Valerian, with his own hand. This was unheard of. I mean, for Roman pride, this was an absolute nosedive.
So, this begs the big question, right? How in the world does the ruler of the greatest superpower on the planet become a prisoner of war? How does Valerian, the guy in charge of everything from Britain to the Middle East, end up in chains? Well, it wasn't just a case of bad luck. Nope, this was a perfect storm brewing for a long, long time.
Okay, to really get what went down in 260, we gotta pull the camera back, way back. See, this whole disaster, it didn't just happen in a vacuum. It was really just one super bloody chapter in a conflict that was basically an ancient Cold War. A brutal, centuries-long slugfest between the two heavyweights of the era, Rome and Persia.
And just look at this timeline. The sheer scale of it is mind-boggling. We're talking 681 years. This wasn't one war, it was a whole series of them. This constant, grinding conflict that went on for generation after generation. It shaped the entire world for nearly 7 centuries. So, Valerian's capture? Yeah, it's a huge deal, a massive flashpoint, but it's just one part of a much, much bigger story.
And here's the crazy part. After all that fighting, for all the blood and treasure spent, the border barely even moved. I mean, cities were burned, entire armies were wiped out, emperors were killed or captured, and yet neither side could land that final knockout punch. It was just this brutal, endless tug of war that bled both superpowers totally dry. So the key takeaway here is that by the time we get to 260, these guys are tough for sure, but they are also deeply, deeply exhausted.
Okay, so let's zoom back in on our main event. The stage is the mid-3rd century. Historians have a name for this period, the crisis of the 3rd century. And trust me, it's not an exaggeration. It really was a crisis. Rome was just getting hammered from every single direction, all at once. It was the absolute perfect setup for a catastrophe.
I mean, just look at this laundry list of problems. You've got a devastating plague, wiping people out, weakening the army. You've got Gothic tribes just pouring across the northern borders. Internally, it's a mess. Non-stop civil wars, emperors getting assassinated left and right. And then, as if that's not enough, out in the east, the old Parthian Empire is gone. In its place is this new, aggressive, super-organized Sasanian Empire led by this incredibly ambitious guy, Shapur I. The Roman Empire was stretched thin. I mean, it was at its breaking point.
And this is where it all boils over. In the year 260, Emperor Valerian decides enough is enough. He gathers a huge army and marches east to deal with Shapur once and for all. The two forces are on a collision course, and the showdown is set to happen near a city called Edessa.
Yeah, this table pretty much says it all, doesn't it? This wasn't a loss. This was an absolute annihilation. Valerian shows up with 70,000 troops, a massive army pulled from all corners of the empire. And Shapur's forces, they didn't just win, they captured the entire thing. Now, some Roman accounts say Valerian was betrayed during peace talks, but honestly, it doesn't matter how it happened. The bottom line is the same. Rome's main army in the east was just gone, wiped off the board in a single move. Seriously, just think about that number for a second. 70,000 soldiers. That's not just one legion getting a bloody nose. That's the whole strategic reserve for the entire Eastern Front. We're talking guys from all over. Germans, Spaniards, Africans, Syrians. And now, they were either dead or, just like their emperor, being marched away as prisoners of war. The loss of manpower was just, it's hard to even comprehend.
So the big question is, what actually happened to Emperor Valerian? And this is where the story gets really interesting, because we have two totally different accounts. It's a classic case of he said, she said, but on an epic historical scale. You've got the story the winners told and the story the losers told.
Okay, so on one side you have the Persian version. It sounds, well, almost civilized. They say Valerian and his men were treated okay, settled in a city, and their engineering skills were put to good use building things like dams and bridges, some of which you can still see today. Then you have the Roman version, and it is pure, unadulterated horror.
They claimed Shapur used the living emperor as a human footstool to get on his horse, and when Valerian finally died, they had him skinned, stuffed with straw like a scarecrow, and hung up in a temple as a trophy.
But wait, there's a huge twist here. The goriest details, the really horrific stuff, most of that comes from later Christian historians. And why is that? Well, it turns out Valerian had been a pretty nasty persecutor of Christians. So for them, this story wasn't just history, it was divine retribution. It was a powerful piece of propaganda to say, see, this is what happens when you mess with us. The real truth? It's probably buried somewhere in the middle, lost between these two very different stories.
Now, losing an emperor in battle was more than just a PR nightmare or a military defeat. It was a signal to the entire world that Rome was vulnerable, that the center couldn't hold, and almost overnight the whole empire started to fracture.
You have to imagine the news spreading like wildfire from town to town. The emperor has been captured. The Eastern army is gone. It created this huge power vacuum. And you know what happens when there's a power vacuum? Every ambitious general and governor across the empire saw their chance.
And boom, the first domino falls. Out in the West, a governor named Postumus looks at the chaos back in Rome and says, yeah, I'm out. He declares his own independent state, which we now call the Gallic Empire.
Meanwhile, back in the East, the guy Valerian left in charge of the money, does he try to rally the troops and save the day? Nope. He uses the cash to declare his own two sons the new emperors.
And the chaos doesn't stop there. Up on the Danube frontier, other generals get the same idea and have their troops proclaim them emperor too. So in just a few short months, the once mighty Roman Empire has shattered into at least 4 warring factions. And it all started with that one single defeat at Edessa.
All right, let's pull back for the big picture one last time. What was the final bill for this 700-year-long war between titans? What did this all lead to?
You know the term Pyrrhic victory? A victory that costs you so much it's basically a defeat? Well, that perfectly sums up this entire Roman-Persian rivalry. Sure, there were wins and losses on both sides, but the endless war was so draining, so costly, that in the long run, both of them lost.
And here's the final, brutal punchline to this centuries-long story. By the early 600s, after one last absolutely devastating war, both Rome and Persia were completely spent. They were broke, their armies were a shadow of their former selves, they were running on fumes. And it was at that exact moment of weakness, when both giants were on their knees, that a new power exploded out of the Arabian desert, the Rashidun Caliphate. They saw their chance and they took it, completely conquering the Sasanian Empire and tearing away Rome's wealthiest provinces.
Which really leaves you with a final chilling question, doesn't it? When two titans spend 7 centuries trying to destroy each other, who actually wins? In the end, this epic rivalry didn't guarantee victory for either Rome or Persia. It just guaranteed that someone else, the one who was waiting in the wings, would inherit the world they had bled each other dry for.